All right, welcome back to my PC building series. This is the PC Expert Amateur, and we're looking at the inside of the case. I've already removed these two. Now, keep in mind that not all cases have reusable slot covers. This one does, fortunately for me, but I have purchased others where you have to punch them out, and then you can't put them back in because they were actually part of the metal around it. So by removing it, you made it something that you couldn't use again without some modifications. So you would need to buy something like this that would allow you to cover up your slots. So I took out these two by removing these two screws here, and then putting in the graphics card here will be very, very easy. Also, you'll notice we've got standoffs here. Now, unfortunately, this was sent by my niece's uncle. Thank you very much for that. And it didn't come with the screws, and it only came with 6 standoffs, so I added 3 standoffs. I didn't have any more the gold ones, so I added black ones. That's why it looks different. And this is the configuration necessary for an ATX motherboard. I believe you could. There are more screw holes over here. I'm not sure what size that would be for. It kind of makes me feel like they're expecting people to be able to put eATX in here, but I don't think this was actually marketed for eATX motherboards, and it's hard to get an ATX in here. So one thing I will reiterate that I mentioned before is if you're working in a relatively small case like this one, and I've got one that's smaller, that's a micro ATX. If you put the fans in here first and here, you're going to have trouble putting your motherboard in place. So do not install fans here and here ahead of time. I know it's tempting, but then you're going to have cables in the way, and the fans are going to be in the way too. So I'm sorry about the weird angle. It's just I've got the case situated on top of its own box, and I'm going to actually try to make this a little bit easier for you to see. Just give me a minute. I think that looks a little bit better. It's a little bit precarious, but fortunately the phone holder that I have hanging off of my sound box makes a good place to perch my camera and my light. A little bit weird, but hey, it's okay. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to bring my motherboard into the picture, and this is something again you want to be careful about. Make sure that you have, if you have any concerns about static electricity, that you wear your static electricity dissipation bracelet, and that really makes it freaking awkward for me though. Now I've also got my screws that I'm going to be using to mount the motherboard. This case didn't have screws, and the motherboard for some reason didn't have screws, so yeah, not ideal. But fortunately, when I was still living in Milwaukee, I took apart I think it was like 25, 30 computers and recycled them and got lots of screws, so I had no trouble whatsoever replacing that stuff. Alright, it's a little bit awkward doing this, but basically you're just trying to make sure that this back input output panel fits into the hole that's here. You can see where my fingers are, and that the holes in the motherboard, such as these and that one, and you can't really see the other two over there, are on top of the standoffs. Right. That actually looks pretty darn good right now. That was easier than I anticipated it was going to be, honestly. Now, again, as always, when putting in your screws, And you don't have to use the kind of silvery colored screws that I'm using. You can use any screws you want to that fit the standoffs properly. Uh-oh. Why is this being difficult? Uh-oh. I may have to get different screws. Well, we'll see. Maybe not. Yep, that is not working. Let me see about these other holes. It's the same problem. I tried it without the motherboard and it was fine. And that one worked. So let's see about these other ones. These black standoffs that I added do not seem to have the same threading exactly as the other ones. I did actually try and make sure that it matched, but now they clearly are not the right size. So I will have to get different standoff screws, not standoff screws, different screws for these 3 standoffs. Which is irritating, but, well, you know, every once in a while, you have to be innovative. So I'll just do these other 6 first, and I'll do the rest. The hardest one is going to be the one that's over here, but with my non-LTT screwdriver from Strabito with the extendable shaft, not a problem. So I can go whoop, just like that, and it's easy for me. Eat your heart out, Linus. Yeah, I just love teasing about that fact that they forgot something that's so critical to the ease of building. Now that pop that you heard, that or click, it was actually me going backwards while screwing it in order to make sure that the threads were properly aligned. Because if you don't have the threads properly aligned, you can end up with misthreaded screws, which means that damage can occur. Now, I am not, you know what? I am not happy with these screws because they won't go all the way in because there's that neck on the shaft. And that I thought was going to be good, but I do not have washers to fill the gap, and they won't go in far enough into the standoffs for me to be able to get them flush with the motherboard, which means that they're not contacting the metal around the holes, and as a consequence, they cannot redirect stray energy away from the motherboard to the ground that you should have. Now, if you have a house where there isn't a ground, which is literally a wire that goes, and it's a heavy-duty wire, it goes from your circuit box or your fuse box to a copper rod that is driven into the ground, then you can have stray electricity that will damage all electronics in your house. And I strongly recommend you get one of those installed, because in some countries, electricians are not necessarily interested in doing that. And you could actually cause serious damage. Not you cause it, but your bad electrical system will cause serious damage to your electrical stuff. So let me grab different screws. I did want to show you that for these screws for the motherboard standoffs, you're going to, oh my god, I can't make my hand, alright, you know what, I'm just going to do it like that. I don't know if you can tell very well, but the threads on this are very close together, and that's what you're going to need generally for standoffs. So you want to make sure that you get the right shaft thickness and that you get the right distance between threads, which is very minimal on these. I can't, for some reason my camera doesn't want to focus that close. All right, let me get those replaced. Okay, so I found the right screws. They are like this one, although they don't all have the washer on them, but that's okay. I am going in here kind of blind, trying to get to the very last hole, which I can't quite see. Oh, there you are. I decided not to waste your time with the time it took me to find and install the other 8 ones. I haven't tightened them all the way down just because I was afraid there might be a challenge with placement or something like that. Well, that's not the right one then. Let's try that again. This is what happens when your motherboard and case don't have the screws included with them, which is kind of unusual. But you can see I'm doing the last one. Now I'm going to tighten this one down all the way. You only want to tighten it until it stops. You do not want to force it because you want the motherboard to be firmly held in place. You do not want to crack the motherboard and risk damaging circuitry as a result. Now the one that's the most challenging, aside from that one down there that I did last, is the one that's over here, because this is in a well and it's hard to get the screw head or the screw bit properly in there and find the X marks the spot. Okay, that's good. Almost done. I think I got them all. Just double check. Yep, they're all tightened down. And that's all there is for that, except for adding the graphics card. But I'm going to do that separately from this video, just because in the previous video I showed adding the graphics card without this being in the case, and now I want you to see what it's like putting it in the case now that we've got everything else nice and situated. Again, as with this, make sure that everything down low is already installed prior to installing the graphics card and the CPU cooler. But that is, there I am. It's that's all there is to it. Thanks, and I'll be right back with the next one.